Hi, I'm Michelle Sterling for Friends of Science Society. How many of you saw the Daily Skeptic article about the 1,100 climate scientists who say there's no climate emergency? It was widely distributed in the past couple of weeks on Twitter, but it's something that has driven the journalism community in Alberta, anyway, at least in southern Alberta, completely mad. And I'd like to show you what I mean by that. So let's have a look at what I think is a very, very crucial aspect of life today, and that is the climate crisis in journalism. Now, you may have noticed that there are strange things going on in the media. Like in 2018, when it was 24 degrees above Celsius in the Northwest Territories, this was considered a normal kind of summer. But in 2020, when it's only 20 degrees in the Northwest Territories and all these other numbers are quite a bit lower, suddenly the map is painted bright red and it looks like a climate emergency. And if you look at maps from other places around the world, it seems like other meteorological and weather outlets are reporting similar kinds of catastrophic images, where temperatures in the UK seem to be on a par with what is reported here. But here the map is all bright red, just like there must be a climate crisis. And often you'll see headlines that say the US West is warming up faster than the rest of the world. Russia's coldest region warming 4 times faster than the rest of the globe. Australia heating up faster than the rest of the world. Northern Canada warming at 3 times the global average and will continue to get warmer, faster. And we see that this is going on everywhere. Now, of course, there's a problem with that because it's impossible mathematically that everywhere in the world is warming up faster than the global average temperature. That's simply ridiculous. But it seems to be the common headline. And when we look around the media coverage of the world, we find that even NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg is saying climate change and Russian aggression mean defense of the Arctic is key. And yet, he is one of the very powerful people in the world. And if we look here in Alberta, we find the Lethbridge Herald is saying that the mayor of Lethbridge is taking heat on a climate change tweet that he reposted on his personal Twitter account from an organization that disputes climate change. And now he's having to backtrack, saying this is an opinion that doesn't reflect his own views. Well, what's going on in the media? Let's look and see. Well, there is a media mob on climate. There's a group called Covering Climate Now, which comes from the Columbia Journalism Review, once a very well-respected organization, now really just climate propagandists. And look at this, they have more than 400 outlets worldwide, and their combined audience exceeds 2 billion people every day. So there's really an omerta on dissenting views with all these media. So it's organized by journalists, for journalists. Covering Climate Now is the world's largest media collaborative. Well, doesn't that mean groupthink? We help newsrooms tell the whole climate story, from the heartbreaking dangers to the common sense solutions. Wow, that's really something, isn't it? And of course, there are many Canadian participants in the Columbia Journalism Review. Here's Sean Holman, and he's issued an op-ed here saying Canada's oil giants deserve tougher coverage. Okay, yeah, let's support Canada in an energy crisis. Anyhow, what's happening is this. In Canada, the University of Victoria, Mount Royal University, the Canadian Association of Journalists, and a number of other groups joined together to do a survey, and they came up with this report, which was issued late last fall, actually early December. And on the results of their survey, they say that media should cover climate as a crisis, say scientists and journalists. Oh, okay, well, let's look and see. In their report, Climate Coverage in Canada, there were 143 scientists who responded to their survey, 148 journalists, and 1,006 members of the public. And then we have Mr. Holman saying, the world is warming, humans are responsible, and climate change is already responsible for many disasters, said Professor Sean Holman, one of the study's principal investigators. Scientists, journalists, and the public recognize these facts and want their news media to reflect them. Well, that's pretty impressive. Now let's just look at the principles for ethical journalism at the Canadian Association of Journalists, one of the principal participants in this survey. So it says here that journalists have the duty and privilege to seek and report the truth, encourage civic debate to build our communities, and serve the public interest. We vigorously defend freedom of expression and freedom of the press as guaranteed under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We return society's trust by practicing our craft responsibly and respecting our fellow citizens' rights. That sounds good. And that this goes on in their ethics. We strive for accuracy and fairness. We avoid allowing our biases to influence our reporting. We disclose conflicts of interest. We're independent, so we don't give favored treatment to advertiser or special interests. We don't report about subjects in which we have a financial interest. We don't participate in movements and activities that we cover. And editorial boards and columnists or commentators endorse political candidates or causes. Reporters do not. Well, and some more of their ethical guidelines. We respect diversity. We seek to capture in our stories the diverse values, viewpoints, and lives of people in our communities. And we are accountable. We will answer to the public for our reporting and conduct. When we make a mistake, we correct it promptly and ungrudgingly and in a manner that matches the seriousness of the error. So that all sounds pretty good. And furthermore, in their ethical guidelines, accuracy. We are disciplined in our efforts to verify all facts. Accuracy is the moral imperative of journalists and news organizations and should not be compromised even by pressing deadlines of the 24-hour news cycle. And another participant in the survey was the CWA Canada, the media union, and they recognize that news gathering institutions have the trusted responsibility to create a fair, balanced, honest, and accurate product that reflects not only the overall integrity of the collective services performed by the employees who work for the news organization, but the integrity of the organization itself. And the CWA promotes these principles. Those who work at news gathering institutions shall be guaranteed freedom of speech, belief, and association in their workplace. Well, okay. Now, if we go and look at the survey, what we find written in the published report is a statement that says facts are facts. But this was an opinion survey. And here, the question is, do scientists, journalists, and the public agree human activity is causing climate change? And so it goes on to say 100% of scientists and 98% of journalists surveyed said the average global temperature is getting warmer. And most who said that said it's because of human activity such as burning of fossil fuels. But this agreement with the facts of climate change isn't shared to the same degree by the public. 86% of them said average global temperature is getting warmer, and among those who said that, 80% said this is because of human activity. But nowhere is there any verification if these are the facts of climate change? This is an assumption. So we sent this to Professor Emeritus D.K. Johnson, who was also at the University of Victoria. And he had these comments on page 12. The report states that 77% of the scientists surveyed strongly agree with the statement there is a climate crisis, and an additional 19% of the scientists somewhat agreed with that statement. The report also describes the responses of a sample of journalists and the members of the public to this statement. But obviously, the opinions of these people are irrelevant to the question of whether there really is a climate crisis. So, do you see what's happened? They've done a survey without determining if there's any truth or dissent to their fundamental premise that there's a climate crisis. And yet, as journalists, as I showed you in their ethical guidelines, their fundamental principle as journalists is to seek out accuracy and truth and not be hampered by even a 24-hour news cycle, but to seek the truth and also to stimulate open civil debate. So we're not seeing that here, are we? So Professor Emeritus Johnson goes on to say on page 22-23 of the report, it explains how the scientist survey were selected. Our research team invited 1,015 researchers in Canada who'd published 4 or more peer-reviewed scientific papers about climate change prior to 2021 to participate in the survey. But, he points out, the report says nothing about where these papers had to be published in order for a scientist to meet the selection criterion. Thus, there's a definite possibility that this original sample of scientists was biased. For example, journals that were willing to publish contrarian views may have been excluded at the outset. And they also had a section in the report called Open Mic, where they had solicited opinions and recommendations. What recommendations do scientists and journalists have for improving climate coverage? Now, from the guidelines that I read you, it seemed quite clear that journalists are not supposed to be activists. They're not supposed to be biased. They're not supposed to be taking positions on things before they fully researched them, and if they are, they're supposed to upfront state that they are in a conflict of interest of some kind. So let's look at what they recommend. Not to be afraid of climate-denying billionaires. Ooh, okay. To use simple visual indicators such as a countdown to a day when more than 1.5 degrees Celsius is reached. Okay? Promote climate change to the lead item in the newscasts and front page of print and online media. All right? Stop being an echo chamber for anti-science propagandists. Ban all fossil fuel advertising. How do these people get paid? Tell them how much time we have left. Use a countdown clock. Cover it as an ongoing emergency. It needs daily coverage, like COVID. Well, there you have it. I mean, these are supposed to be objective, calm, thoughtful, fact-seeking people, and yet they're saying that we shouldn't be afraid of climate-denying billionaires. Anyway, let's go on with this and have a look and see what else there is. So, is it truth or opinion? Now, this is again from Professor Johnson's review. Of the 1,015 scientists, 143, or about 14.1%, responded to the survey. Thus, all we are given are the opinions of a small self-selected subset of scientists from the first sample. Consequently, this report provides no reason whatever to believe that there is a climate crisis. However, the question being asked by the report is not, is there a climate crisis, but rather, should news outlets cover climate change as a crisis? Well, no doubt there are many people who believe that the first question is completely irrelevant to the second question. And it looks like, actually, the project lead was just trying to follow The Guardian. And so a couple of years ago, The Guardian, which is a paper out of the UK, as you probably know, made a public statement that they were going to change their language and refer to climate change as a crisis all the time. And they had kind of a long editorial op-ed on it, why this is so important to use the right language to describe the climate crisis. Again, they did no research to determine if there is a climate crisis or not. So let's continue here. Now, at the end of the report, they have this big list of acknowledgments. So, all these people reviewed the questions. All of them reviewed early versions of these surveys. And I guess none of them noticed that there was no question like, is there a climate crisis? And if there is, how should we cover it? So we've got here, I've marked in purple the people associated with freedom of speech or free press associations. In blue, I've marked the actual scientists. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scientists. And then we've got these 2 activist organizations covering Climate Now, which I just showed you, and Thomas Reuters Foundation, which I can't call really a press organization anymore because they are completely into climate dogma. But there are dissenting views on climate crisis. And Clintel, the climate intelligence think tank based in the Netherlands, has over 1,100 signatories who say there's no climate emergency. And that was the story that the unfortunate mayor of Lethbridge idly tweeted as interesting. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, AR6 Working Group, Physical Sciences, uses the word crisis once in their report, referring to media coverage. So that doesn't sound like a crisis, does it? And after Roger Pielke Jr., a climate policy expert out of the US, after he reviewed this very report, he reported that the implausible catastrophic RCP 8.5 scenario is no longer seen as our likely future or business as usual. And what am I talking about there? Up until very recently, this set of scenarios about the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and its effect on warming were used widely in research, and the most widely used was this one, the RCP 8.5, which is actually an implausible scenario. It's not going to happen. And so if we take that away, if we're not reliant on that one, then obviously there's no climate emergency. And this is from 2017. In 2017, we were about here in terms of warming and emissions. So, when we're here, and it looks like our future is probably going to be down here with RCP 4.5, there's no climate emergency. It's over, and we do have time. But this is not being reported in the press, is it? In fact, when the Clintel Declaration came out, I sent, we sent the declaration that Clintel had issued. There were about 500 scientists signatory then. They had sent it to the UN by registered mail the same week that Greta was there berating everyone. You know, you've stolen my childhood and our house is on fire and how dare you. So 500 scientists sent a registered letter to the UN requesting a high-level meeting of scientists, and in it they stated the World Climate Declaration that there's no climate emergency. I took that press relief, I sent it to more than 500 news outlets in Canada and some in the US, and nobody picked it up. So, I was really furious. Like, even if they want to pick it up and say, look at this trash, this is not true, but comment on it. So they didn't. And so I thought, well, I'll just read it on camera, which I did. And within days, without us promoting it really whatsoever, like we don't have robots or anything like that promoting our material, within days we had 700,000 views. And then Facebook started banning it. So I also had an invitation from BBC Radio to be on a show, but they canceled at the last minute and they took on Nomi Oreskes instead, who's the author of a consensus survey, the one that Al Gore made famous. Now, I think that if you're going to be media, then you should report on everything, shouldn't you? And here's poor Mayor Huygen. All he said was that it was an interesting article. And what happens is that CTV News decides to smear him. Lethbridge Mayor shares climate change denial post. There's nothing denying climate change in the story or in Clintel. So, this is like a personal attack on this fellow. And of course, all the activists are going to go after him. And immediately he had to backtrack, saying, I'd like to clarify the article I linked to doesn't reflect my personal beliefs on climate change. Well, yeah, all he said was interesting article. That's it. And it should be an interesting article. Sadly, we're at the point in our society now where we can't even have open civil debate. There are many views on climate change, many dissenting views, many diverse views. For a society that's obsessed with diversity, the one place they don't allow you to have diverse views is climate change. But we put together this kind of spectrum of views, so you can have everything from someone who's completely unconcerned about it, maybe they're more focused on healthcare, education, the economy, jobs, trade, immigration, or global terrorism. You could have people who are concerned about pollution more than climate, people who might be concerned about human impacts on climate, people who are concerned about climate and pollution, but they want to see a cost-benefit analysis. You have people who are worried about climate change, but they find the messages very confusing and contradictory. So, like, why does Al Gore fly so much? If there was warming and cooling before, how is this different? There are some people who are angry that people think the economy matters over climate and the future of the planet. What about my kids? And there are people who are absolutely terrified of a climate apocalypse. And many of these people decide to go vegan, not to have children, not to drive, and they might engage in other sacrifice to save the planet. So, how do we square the fact that we have people on this entire spectrum of views, and nobody should be demonized for having a different view on climate? That's the whole point of having freedom of expression, which the journalists' ethical guidelines claim to support. Another element of journalism, of professional journalists, and this is from ethics guidelines out of the States, and that is to minimize harm. So ethical journalism treats sources, subjects, colleagues, and members of the public as human beings deserving of respect. Journalists should balance the public's need for information against potential harm or discomfort, and show compassion for those who may be affected by news coverage. And as we saw, it certainly appears to me that the news media, especially CTV, went out of their way to label the mayor, with a term that they would know that this would bring all kinds of activists to berate him, to harass him, to denounce him, and he didn't even agree with the article. He just said it was interesting. That's all. So they've actually created harm for this unfortunate person who just wanted to stimulate debate. And furthermore, in the CTV News article, they spoke with a social media expert CTV News spoke with, said everyone, especially elected officials, need to watch what they say and share online. What we find systematically in research on misinformation is these throwaway tweets from people of influence actually do go deeper to the network. It actually spreads further, said Jean-Christophe Boucher with the U of C's, that's Calgary, School of Public Policy. People of influence are a trusted interlocutor of people. So people say, if the mayor says this, then that might be true. I'm going to reshare this. Well, how credible is this individual? Rupa Subramanya, who is an excellent journalist and has had articles published in many outstanding publications in North America. She was smeared in this research by this gentleman as a Russian disinformer. And as she posted on Twitter, I've had 0 interactions with this fellow who put me on a list of handles spreading Russian disinformation in a report. He's blocked me. If his report is accurate, he should be willing to take questions about it. He can block me, but that won't prevent legal action. Those are her opinions, of course. I'm just reading her statement. So, this is who CTV News spoke to as a social media expert. And speaking of Russia, if we go back to the original tweet from CTV talking about Secretary General of NATO Jens Stoltenberg saying that climate change and Russian aggression mean defense of the Arctic is key, how do you think we're going to fare if he's busy with climate change when this is how Russia looks at climate change? This presentation we got via the Clintel network some years ago, and we just posted it, I think it was in 2020, just out of passing interest, because it was about the Kyoto Protocol in 2004. Kyoto was the forerunner to the Paris Agreement. And obviously, the Russians see it as an assault on economic growth, the environment, public safety, science, and human civilization itself. So one of the things I want to point out is that no reporters talked to Clintel, not one. So the articles basically attack the newspaper or attack the individual. So CTV said critics are turning up the heat on the mayor of Lethbridge, who reposted a story written by an organization known to spread lies about climate change. Well, they didn't talk with Clintel. Global said they interviewed James Byrne, who's a professor emeritus at University of Lethbridge. We're arguing vociferously about the science and how important the science is, said James Byrne, a professor emeritus in climate solutions research at the University of Lethbridge. Byrne said the story shared by Higgin isn't true. It's foolishness, absolute deceit, that article, Byrne said. And then the Lethbridge Herald said that tweet provoked a heated response from many, including Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips, who wrote on Twitter, "The article is not interesting. It is disinformation clickbait. Engaging in this well-known disinformation site does not reflect well on scientific or media literacy. Accurate information is the foundation of a healthy democracy. Best not to indulge in conspiracies." So, do any of these parties know who Professor Emeritus Richard Lindzen is? Because he's a respected leader in atmospheric sciences, and he's a signatory to the Clintel Declaration. And one of his famous quotes is, "Controlling carbon is a bureaucrat's dream. If you control carbon, you control life." And they probably could have gotten an interview with him, but no one spoke to Clintel. So what's happening here is that the media is engaging in struggle, which is what used to happen in Maoist China, against anyone exposing climate change dogma. And this excerpt is from the book Tombstone. So in 1958, Xinjiang Xiping County was given nationwide publicity for the Great Leap production successes, referred to as Sputniks or satellites. These grand achievements were attributed to the struggle against right-deviating conservatism. In an atmosphere of extreme political pressure, anyone who dared question the accuracy of these reported crop yields risked being labeled a doubter or denier, engaged in casting aspersions on the excellent situation, and anyone who exposed the fraudulence of the high-yield model was subjected to struggle. So, in Maoist China, struggle meant that you would be put in a circle of your colleagues and you would be pushed back and forth, pushed around, harassed and mocked, and perhaps even beaten. If you fell down, you might be beaten, you might even be kicked to death, to try and make you comply and admit your errors and remove your doubts. So these struggle sessions are now being publicly conducted in the media, on Twitter, and without regard for harms to individuals, which is supposedly a fundamental principle of ethical journalism. So if we actually go and do a little bit of research like journalists are supposed to do, if we look at the Clintel World Climate Declaration, what do we find? We find there are over 80 Canadian scientists and scholars who agree that there's no climate emergency. We find there are over 1,100 international scientists and scholars who are Clintel signatories. And they agree with these principles, that natural as well as anthropogenic factors cause warming. Warming is far slower than predicted. Climate policy relies on inadequate models. These are computer simulations that, are subject to the whims of whoever puts the information in. CO2, carbon dioxide, is plant food, the basis of all life on Earth. CO2 is not a pollutant. It is essential to all life on Earth. And global warming has not increased natural disasters. There's no statistical evidence that global warming is intensifying hurricanes, floods, droughts, and such like natural disasters, or making them more frequent. And climate policy must respect scientific and economic realities. There's no climate emergency, therefore there's no cause for panic and alarm, and no need, may I add, for net zero targets. Now, you would think that having a group of people holding those views, qualified people, would be in the public interest. You would think that even if a journalist or a news outlet disagreed with that perspective, that it would be their moral and ethical obligation to report on it, even if they wanted to mock them, even if they wanted to dismiss them, as Shannon Phillips did in referring to the newspaper as misinformation, disinformation. But you would think they would be obliged, as a matter of course, to actually interview someone from Clintel and report on what they had to say and what their position was. So what do we find here? Let's just go back for a moment to the principles for ethical journalism. Journalists have a duty and privilege to seek and report the truth, encourage civic debate, to build our communities and serve the public interest. We vigorously defend freedom of expression and freedom of the press as guaranteed under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and we return society's trust by practicing our craft responsibly and respecting our fellow citizens' rights. What kind of respect is it to put the mayor of a fairly small city into the position of being labeled a climate denier? What kind of group of journalists goes after a person for a retweet that says interesting article and nothing more? What kind of incitement is this by the media against an individual who was elected by the people, and a media that claim to support free expression and that they claim to support open public debate and charter rights, and yet they're acting in a manner to shut down debate, to instill fear in individuals, to deny evidence from qualified scientists that is important to the public debate, and to literally mislead the public in every possible way. So that's my review of what just recently happened. And I'm hoping that maybe people will take it upon themselves to challenge the media outlets across Canada and around the world, because they're all participating in covering climate now. But maybe individuals will take the time to challenge your local news outlets when you see this kind of improper reporting. Go and read up on the ethics and the journalistic guidelines, and challenge them when they are crossing these lines. Challenge them for berating ordinary individuals, for having a different point of view. Ask them to host an open public debate. If they're so sure about climate change as a catastrophe, then they should be running nightly news shows with dissenting views and having open public debate. And let's see. I mean, if you look at Germany, if you look at the UK, if you look at Europe, these countries are being decimated right now, and people will literally die this winter from heat or eat poverty, thanks to net zero targets and faulty climate and energy policies that have been accumulating for the past 20 years. But now they're going to be crushed. And yes, it's true that Russia is taking advantage of that, but they were already going down that path years before. In 2018, Marijn Poels was one of our guest speakers. He's from Germany, from Holland. He told us that at that time, thousands of Germans had been cut off from their power because they couldn't pay their bill. That was in 2018. It's going to be much worse this year. They were celebrating Christmas by candlelight. In 2013, we brought Dr. Benny Peiser to Calgary. He's with the Global Warming Policy Foundation in the UK, and he gave a presentation called "To Heat or Eat: Europe's Failed Climate Policy." That was in 2013. In that presentation, he showed us slides with headlines that pensioners were spending Christmas Day in bed because they didn't have money for food and they didn't have money for heating. Imagine what it will be like this year as power prices skyrocket into the thousands of pounds. Hundreds of small businesses will shut down because they can't afford to pay their energy bill. And yet, how did they get to that point? They got to that point because of a compliant media that did not allow open civil debate, that did not promote full cost-benefit analysis, that dismissed and denigrated people who had the courage to stand up and say, you know what, I think we should look at this again. I don't think it's right. So we're heading down that same path in Canada. Our climate policies are ruinous to society and our economy. Robert Lyman did a presentation for us in 2017, which was called "Can Canada Survive Climate Change Policy?" At the time, he was optimistic that we could. Now, I don't think that he is. So you can go back and look at those references. I'll put the links in the PowerPoint and on the blog post where I'll put this with the video, so that you can have a look at those if you want to. Anyway, I thank you very much for listening to the presentation and my rant. If you can, we'd love to have you donate $20. It's our 20th year of operation. You can just do a quick e-transfer to contact@friendsofscience.org. or you can join us. You can become a member. You'll get more of our materials, our newsletters with roundups of information from around the world. And you can share our stuff. If you don't have the money to join or donate, please share our material, and please don't think that we want you to agree with us. We want you to simply be informed and be willing to discuss different points of view on climate change. We stand for open, civil debate on climate and energy policies and full cost-benefit analysis. This should be the norm in public policy. So I invite you to join us on our journey as we try to turn the Titanic of climate tyranny around and go back to port, go back to a place what we used to call normal. For Friends of Science Society, I'm Michelle Sterling. Thank you.